So, BlizzCon Day 2, the final day, is in the books. It's all over at this point. Nothing to do now but go home. I've already got my taxi to the airport ready to go. Got my confirmation for the flight. Hopefully, I will be home in about 24 hours. A little less than 24 hours at this point. So, day 2, day 1 I was planning on pretty much what I did was, being in the panels throughout the day, checking out the news, seeing what new information was coming about WoW. And day 2, it was mostly question and answer panels, which are okay, but I hadn't really planned on attending any of them, specifically attending any of them anyway. So the first thing that I did when I got there this morning, a bit later than usual because I slept in a little more than I expected, played Mists again as Panda Hunter to try out the change for no melee weapon, just ranged weapon, so you can shoot someone in the face at point blank, finally. Feels pretty good. It'll be interesting, again, to see how it looks for PvP especially, that you won't be able to beat a hunter just by getting into their craw. After that, I started wandering around, checked out the store, went over to the Retro Arcade, where they had all the old Blizzard games, RPM Racing, Lost Vikings, Blackthorn, Rock and Roll Racing. I played RPM Racing and Rock and Roll Racing mainly for a nostalgia kick. I owned both of those games on my SNES, played the shit out of them, and it was really great to play them again on an SNES. Like, I have emulated versions of them, and I have an SNES controller plugged into it, and this might have been, I just saw a cord going into the middle of nowhere, but it was good to play them again, even RPM Racing, which Blizzard admitted is like, yeah, that wasn't a very good game. And no, it really wasn't that good of a game, but I still owned it and played it to death. But especially the sequel, Rock and Roll Racing. RPM Racing was the first game I ever played where there was a track editor. I know there are other games, racing games, that specifically have that, like Trackmania, I believe. But RPM Racing was the first one that I ever played that had that editor to make your own racetracks. It was pretty interesting. My brother and I kept coming up with these hideously complex tracks that were pretty much impossible to play properly. So, played some Rock and Roll Racing, and then wandered around the booths. Checked out the Mega Bloks booth to see the gigantic Thrall made out of, they're not Legos, but blocks, you know what I mean? Checked out the other merchandise places, like the ones that had the custom spray paint art, WoW-related art for the side of computer cases. That Jaina case looked pretty spiffy, but I kind of have a geek on for Jaina. Can't wait to get her book, by the way. I went to the NVIDIA booth mainly because I wanted to try out, finally, this 3D computing, the 3D gaming. I'm overall not very sold on 3D because I have these, and to wear the 3D glasses comfortably, like in movies and stuff, typically requires that I remove these. And it was sometimes really hard to tell when something was 3D, even with the glasses and all. Especially the movie like Alice in Wonderland, which I thought was really, really not worth the 3D at all. On the opposite end of that spectrum is a movie like Avatar, which had 3D based. It was based on having this 3D imagery right from the start. And it looked really good, really colorful, really shiny. And the 3D of that was very good. So we need more Avatar and less Alice. So when it came to gaming, I really wasn't sure what to expect. I tried to. They had this setup of 3 monitors, so WoW would play across all 3 monitors. You'd have the full 3D effect across them all, and you were able to connect to your own account, so you could play your own character and see how it looked. Unfortunately, I don't have my authenticator with me here in California. I left it back at home on my keychain. I tried to text my brother and be like, "Hey, you have my keys?" "Yep." "Yeah, they're at Grandpa's." "Oh, shit." So much for that idea. Would have been fun to see Trib in 3D. Anyway, after wandering around the panels, I checked to see if I might be able to play the Diablo single player. They had a whole lot more machines for the multiplayer because they're doing balancing now. The single player, though, had this massive line, and I resolved early on that I was not going to be standing in any massive lines for more than, say, 10 or 20 minutes. And I didn't. Even playing Mists, the lines were cranking very quickly. At least when I went to them. I didn't look at any major panels besides that, or any booths besides that. I went past the guild, wanted to saw Felicia there. Again, though, they all had this massive line for signing of merchandise and things like that. I browsed past the artist panel just to see what they were going up to. They were drawing orcs, of course. Everybody draws orcs. They were 3D modeling something with horns, which was neat. And finally I realized I really didn't have anything else that I really wanted to do at this point, aside from the closing ceremony, which wasn't for several hours. So I just headed for the main stage, grabbed a seat, and just settled in for a while. So I did end up watching 2 of the Q&As. The class, item, and profession Q&A, of course, had a whole lot of questions based after the big reveal about talents. And then the open Q&A, which had a question that was relevant to my interests. A woman asked about plans for future LGBT characters. And my first thought was, well, there are a few in WoW, like off the top of my head, that elf in Northrend who waggles her eyebrows suggestively at the fellow elf, the hunter and the flight master, maybe, I don't know. And then that pair in Alterac. Again, there's never any, Blizzard saying, "Oh, by the way, they have homosexual sex" when they're off the screen. So there's never going to be any confirmation like that. But there's clues here and there. There are certain NPCs that will flirt with you no matter what your gender is. Things like that. That always seems like a little bit of a cheat for me. That's basically just how the quest text is coded, that there's not really a way to switch that. So any NPC that's going to be flirty is like automatically bisexual and loves every race ever. I kind of want to see Pained in Jaina, but again, that's my own personal preference. So after the panels, I watched the Stargate finals that were being simulcast to all the main screens. That was impressive. I've never watched any of the StarCraft esports stuff, but this was really, it got me amped up watching it. I was really pumped up for StarCraft about these guys. This guy, both Korean, MVP versus Nestea. I have no idea who they are, but MVP was down 1-0 when they started this, so it was a best of 3. So whoever won out of 3 matches of 3 wins, and he was down 1-0 and ended up coming back to win. It was like a 40-minute final game, and wow, Man, these guys are good at StarCraft. I am way bad at it. But I never watched it before. It's pretty impressive. Then after that ended, the concert was the closing ceremony and concerts of the developer band Elite Tauren Chieftains, and then Foo Fighters, of course. Before the concert started, the sound guy that was with Jimmy Kimmel saw me, said hi. So I asked him how things were going, so they're editing it together. So we should be good to go on Monday night. I'm looking forward to that one. Tauren Chieftains, like they have the art guy, story guy, producer, etc., as various members of the band. Of course, Horde-centric, but Horde's cool. Whatever. And then Foo Fighters. Holy crap, Foo Fighters. They rocked my face off. There was a couple of moments there. The lead singer runs out into the crowd. He's supposed to get to his solo, and he stops out in the crowd. And there's this girl with the biggest boobs I've ever seen. She hands me a Sharpie and says, "Would you sign my tits?" That's the rock star moment. And it doesn't happen often, children, kids. I drove down here in a minivan. He tells this little story about the van. And then at the end, dude, did you just take my picture with a fucking iPad? You know, there's this little tiny thing that does the same thing. Never mind. He was a riot. It was a very good concert. Very entertaining. I am out of memory. So, yeah, BlizzCon is over. I think I might want to return. We'll see how it goes. Boobs.